Good evening, guys. Welcome to the Boxing Gossip Podcast. We go live every Wednesday at 8:30. Can see a lot of the usual faces in the chat. Good evening, Tony. Good evening, Stuart. Good evening, Broken Nose, Jonathan, to Leon, Oasis, Craig, George, to Jared, Stahis, Derek. Hope everyone is doing well. Brett, thanks all for tuning in. Tonight, podcast number 65, we are, of course, going to be looking back at the recent Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor fight. We're going to be talking the undercard. We're going to be talking Gervonta Davis. We're going to be talking the end of Nathan Cleverly's professional boxing career. Tears in the Boxing Gossip household. I don't mind sharing at that announcement. We're also going to be talking some of the other news in boxing, maybe a look ahead to next week's boxing as well, and covering all the news in the sport. Breaking news in the past hour or so that Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor is at least reported to have absolutely smashed previous pay-per-view records. So, yeah, without further ado, let's get started. On panelist and normal tonight. I understand Jay is traveling, but hopefully he'll be able to jump on later. Irish Tom is in Ireland, and hopefully he's going to be able to jump on later. Understanding is that Paul hopefully will be joining at some point as well, but at the minute it's just me and Jet on the line. So without further ado, let me start by bringing in Jet. Jet, how's things?
Not so bad. The BG fans are going to have to endure me tonight, unfortunately.
I know, mate. I know. Just the two of us, hey. But yeah, hopefully, hopefully some other people will join. But if not, I'm sure you and I will make the best of it, mate. Jet, there's only one place to start. That is with Floyd versus Conor McGregor. Give us your take in as much detail as you like, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I just put up a video about 10, 15 minutes ago discussing the fight. I didn't really have too much to say in terms of analysis because I felt everyone else covered it. You done a two-part sort of video, and I felt you covered it adequately enough. I was a bit late to the party, but I kind of wanted to gather my thoughts on the fight. For me, I know people are giving Conor McGregor a lot of credit, more credit than they would have given him before the start of the fight. But I do think Floyd really allowed him to be as effective as he wanted to be in there. Floyd had no respect for his power, no respect for his skill set, and I know he was training kind of on the sort of on the down low, but he wasn't training as effectively as as before. We've seen the videos out on social media about him eating pizza and hooking up with girls and whatnot. So he wasn't really taking it as serious as as expected, and he did look his age in there. I'll put it that way. Floyd did look his age in there, but I think he really allowed McGregor to, being the novice that McGregor is, he allowed him to basically burn himself out into the later rounds. We know people who do watch MMA actually know that Conor McGregor does get tired as the fight goes on and you put pressure on, and Floyd just came down with a high guard, just push him on the back foot. And if you actually watch the fight, he didn't really cut off the ring. We see these fighters such as I don't know, Lomachenko, Gennady Golovkin, these sort of guys who are experts at cutting off the ring. But Floyd didn't even do that. He just pushed him back on the back foot and made Conor throw punches, which was, which shows his inexperience. It's in the boxing ring, he's very, very inexperienced. He was basically throwing punches for the sake of it, just to try and push Floyd back, and it worked for Floyd because he got a 10th round KO or stoppage. And yeah, that's kind of how the fight panned out. I think he allowed McGregor, the first early rounds, he allowed him to kind of just get his groove in the fight. McGregor's skills are questionable. His jab is yeah. I don't want to say I don't want to quote you, but I was going to say in my video I made, it was a David Price-esque jab, but You know, he didn't really have any sort of spite on his punches. I think Paulie said it and you said it in your fight, post fight analysis that you know it's difficult to transition from MMA to boxing and put your weight on your punches. And there's that one video where McGregor throws out his right jab and basically he's just touched Floyd's nose, and Floyd's basically laughing in front of him because he's not touched him properly, and that kind of just sets the fight in that sums up the fight. Sorry, and yeah, I mean he done well in spots. McGregor he had a nice uppercut, I guess at times. He had a semi decent right hook at times. I'm not going to say it was world class or anything, but he done he done okay. He done better than I guess people expected, but I think Floyd really allowed him to do the majority of stuff he was doing in the ring, and come later on in the fight, he obviously backed up his words and stopped him. Fairly. I wouldn't say easily, but I would say with less, less. More ease than he would stop another fighter, I guess, later beforehand, maybe a Ricky Hatton. You compare the two, they're just not comparable, McGregor and Ricky Hatton. But I guess it was more of a spectacle. It is what we expected, late stoppage or points. And yeah, Floyd, 50-0, congrats to him. It's best he leaves the game now because I don't think he wants Father Time to catch up with him.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Jet, seeing as it's just the two of us, I'll probably ask a few more questions than I normally would, but I think there's probably quite a few questions to ask about this fight. So I guess let's start with Conor McGregor. If we look at his performance, was his performance better than what you expected, or worse than what you expected?
I mean, it's a bit difficult to say in terms of I think it's a bit in the middle of everything. We kind of said that his punches they're not constructed very well, and I think that you could see that he was like a wild man at a pub. Sometimes in there you could see he's slapping down his punches, and it was awkward to see. I think he did slightly better, but then again, I want to give him some credit, but I don't want to give him. I don't want to give him all the credit because I do think again Floyd allowed him to do a lot of those things. Coming towards basically the last fight of his career, a big money fight, and he's kind of openly said, "Well, I'm not really training for this fight, and I'm not really taking it as serious as the other fights." I think against Manny Pacquiao, Sal Canelo Alvarez, and Miguel Cotto, he had a real respect for those guys' punching power and for their skill set. I think this one he allowed Conor McGregor to come forward, allowed him to be high output, high volume, be aggressive at times. Floyd, sorry, Conor was actually trying to box with Floyd at times. So I do think he done slightly better, but I wouldn't say he done fantastic or anything like that. I wouldn't say he exceeded every single person's expectation because everyone's expectations is different, I guess. Some people thought he was going to do terrible and he done well. Some people thought he was going to knock out Floyd and he done significantly worse and he got stopped on his feet. So it's difficult to say. I'm probably in the camp that he done slightly better than expected, but again, it was the circumstance that he done better in. I guess it has an asterisk next to it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and where do you stand on the argument? Because my personal belief is that Conor had some success in the fight. Conor won the first 3 rounds on my card, but I largely say that he had that success because Floyd Mayweather let him do that, and I think Floyd wanted to get him to use up a lot of energy, and Floyd wanted to effectively not really do much for the first 3 rounds. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying Conor's success in this fight was because Floyd let him have success and because Floyd wanted him to have that success early on. Where do you stand on that sort of argument?
Yeah, as I said, like throughout pretty much the first sort of 10 minutes we've been talking, I think, you know, a lot of Conor McGregor's success has been because Floyd, you know, let him. He basically he let him box from range. He sussed him out from the first few rounds, and it was evident Floyd was looking for the knockout. He wasn't trying to dance around and be pretty and, you know, be flashy. I think he was just trying to be effective in the spots that he was trying to be effective in, and that was after the third, maybe fourth round. He wasn't really trying to you know, engage with Conor McGregor. He threw very little in the first, you know, 3 rounds, and he basically let him dictate the pace at the start, and maybe for the better because, you know, as we know, a few rounds later on down the line, Floyd stopped him, and maybe that was the game plan from the start. But it must be said, what I can say is Conor McGregor's tactics very, very questionable, very questionable. Don't know if he was trying to be a pressure fighter in there or he was trying to be a counter puncher. Because I said this, I think I said this on the podcast. If people go back and listen, I said Conor McGregor is a counter puncher who's basically fighting the best counter puncher of this generation. You know, it's very, very difficult, and at times he was getting picked off very crisp, very efficiently by Floyd Mayweather. And, you know, it was questionable what he was trying to do. I think he was stuck in between trying to box um, Floyd from the outside, as well as being a pressure fighter. Because if he comes in too close, Floyd will tie him up, or Floyd will catch him, you know, on the way in. His balance seems very poor as well. So, yeah, I'd say I'd agree with what you said. That, you know, Conor had a lot of success in spots, but he had them because Floyd allowed him to have it. And yeah, as I said, Floyd, I think, you know, if he fought like that against a sort of hungry welterweight I know this fight was at light middle, but you know, the any sort of top guy there, Aris Landy Lara, you know, Errol Spence, Terence Crawford, if he moves up, you know, those sort of guys, I think they'd do a real number on Mayweather if that was the Mayweather that thing. I think Mayweather had success against those guys, you know, in certain spots, but he definitely looked his age. He looked to be, you know, on the decline, and you know, it's maybe for the best that he finishes up his career after this.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. Looking more at the McGregor performances, two aspects that I was particularly disappointed on. I speculated on the last podcast that he wouldn't translate to being a big puncher in boxing, but I was actually surprised how little pop was on his punches. And I know this is almost a crazy statement to make, but having watched that in boxing terminology, I'm not even sure he's a bigger puncher than Floyd Mayweather. So I think his lack of power was considerable. I didn't expect him to be a big puncher, but I expected him to look like a bigger puncher than he was. A lot of that came down to, for me, poor technique and poor transition of weight, as we've already discussed. I thought defensively he was appalling. I know you've taken the time to watch that video I did, Jet, but you know the way he was eating punches. You know, there was no riding shots. There was no leaning. He was eating them square in a way you don't really see professional boxers take punches like that. So I thought defensively appalling. I thought power very, very disappointing. What's your take on those areas?
Yeah, I think we've discussed the power. So yeah, he didn't really have any power in there. Let's just put it that way. We've spoken about transition of weight in his
Yeah,
punch, that sort of stuff. His technique was very poor as well. If you're not constructing your punches very, you know, very crisply, very soundly, he's obviously, you know, you're at a deficiency there, as well as the transition of weight from a different sport. It is a different sport, you know. In MMA, you're able to punch from a range, and you can use, you know, wrestling, submission, you know, different types of mixed martial arts to, you know, mix it up. In boxing, is just pure punches, so there is a difference. It's very, very difficult, especially if, you know, Conor McGregor's what, 29, 30. He's
yeah,
not a spring chicken. He's it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, as they say. So yeah, I'd be worried if he was going to box again. You know, even if it was against a lower level guy. It does seem, you know. I think what was the other thing you said? Sorry.
I thought
Yeah, the
one of the worst.
defense.
defensive performances I've seen.
Yeah, the defense was appalling. I agree with that. It was pretty non-existent. He was the jab. He was throwing the jab out, and he was standing, so upright, and his balance looked so poor. That if Floyd countered properly, I think he could have just with a counter power punch, how Floyd normally steps back and throws a straight right. I think he could have got knocked down by that if Floyd wanted to do that. I think Floyd, didn't do that, and Conor McGregor was probably lucky he didn't do that because he would have made him, would have made him look a lot worse. But I think also his conditioning, or at least the way he fought the fight, his tactical approach. I think John Kavanagh is his coach. I think that was, the tactical approach to the fight was very poor. I think, it was an MMA sort of approach to the fight, and he was basically throwing punches just for the sake of it. Without Floyd Mayweather doing really anything coming forward, he was just throwing punches and getting tired, and they were landing on the gloves and arms. I think that was very, very poor. I think it works in MMA, of course. He's very, very effective in MMA. He's a very exciting fighter in MMA, but in boxing, you can't do that if you're a big at the weight or you're cutting a lot of weight and that sort of stuff. It all factors in. It was, it's difficult, but yeah, I think there's a lot of deficiencies in his game. If he does do boxing again, he will struggle again, I think, regardless of what the level he's at.
Absolutely. We'll come to some conversation about whether Conor will continue with boxing and what sort of fighters he would potentially do well against and not do well against later. Yeah, I can see Irish Tom has just joined the podcast. He's making a cameo tonight, so I'll go straight to him and then I'll bring you back in a bit, if that's okay, mate.
Yeah, #Irish Takeover.
There you go. Tom, things, mate.
Not too bad, not too bad.
Are you dialing in from sunny Ireland?
It actually is sunny Ireland.
You're kidding? Hitting
actually.
Yeah.
I was off on the west coast, off in Clare Island, and they get rain like hell over there. And I went over, and the sun came out, and we had glorious 22-degree temperatures for a few days. And when I left, the morning I left, it started pissing rain again. So I've had the luck.
Mate, I was going to say to you, I was in Paris for the weekend, right? And I've gone out on Saturday night in Paris, and I've had a bit of a night out in Paris. And at about 11 o'clock, quite an early finish, I've stumbled back to my hotel. And just as I've been going back to my hotel, I've passed an Irish pub called Corcoran's. So I've stumbled into the Irish pub, and I thought I'll have one for the road. And there's loads of Irish blokes in there who are just getting started. They're starting their night out at 11 with a view to staying up for the McGregor fight and watching it in the Irish pub at 4:30, 5 in the morning, that sort of thing. So anyway, I've had one pint and gone to bed after that. But I've got up and I've gone out walking at about 10:30, 11 the next day, and just by fluke, without intending to, I've walked past this Irish pub at 11 o'clock in the morning, and exactly the same blokes as the night before were all just sat there at the bar, head in hands, lights off, pints still flowing, like literally tears running down cheeks. It looked like a devastated scene in there. Was it big actually in Ireland? Was there a lot of chatter about it at the time?
Well, I was off in the West Coast, so Mayo were playing an All-Ireland football semi-final, so it was all about the football and nearly nothing about Conor McGregor, to be honest.
Oh,
but,
really?
Yeah, but I'd say back in Dublin it would have been more so. But because he is a bit of a superstar here. But yeah, not as much as I thought, to be honest with you. It didn't seem to be as big in the papers. See, I think MMA is in the news media and the papers. I think people haven't taken to it as much as maybe their fans have. People see it as a bit brutal and that. So I don't know how much it gets the exposure here compared to other sports.
Okay, that's interesting. Did you watch the fight?
Well, I watched it terrible. For a second here, where's Paul?
Paul hasn't actually dialed in. tonight. So
Hasn't turned up.
yeah,
That's a funny one because he's normally good for turning up. What do you reckon? What's his reason this week?
I think his dog ate his homework, mate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I did see the fight. Before I was here in my folks' place before I went off to the west to Clare Island, and my father had a bucket of water. He got a bucket, a big barrel of water that comes off the roof, and he dipped a bucket into the water and he dipped it out, and he was looking at this thing. Says, "Is that a fish?" Right? And it seems there was like a little small fish that has been living in the gutters of our house, and it obviously had died and it had swelled up and it was gone all putrid looking, right? And that's kind of what this fight was like, you know. And when we took it out of the bucket to see whether it was a fish or not, because it was kind of weird to see, and when we put it on the ground, the whole thing like just collapsed and just went into a squidgy mess. And that's kind of what this fight was like. Conor McGregor. Let's just let's just look at what this means like for MMA. You have a guy, Conor McGregor, who's 28 and he's their superstar. And after 3 rounds, he was blown out of his arse against a 40-year-old guy who throws 6 punches around for 3 rounds.
And this is a guy who ran through multiple divisions of the UFC.
Ran through the multiple and was knocking guys spark out. And amazingly, he actually caught Floyd with an uppercut. Like, and you know, Floyd he hardly even blinked, you know. And you know, Conor McGregor is and UFC is so overrated. Now, I don't know if, you know, I just think that the level of UFC fighting is so low. It's so low. I think the level of female boxing, you know, and we've given out about, say, how uncompetitive female boxing is, you know, just doesn't have the numbers partaking in the sport. But I'd say it's lower than female boxing, you know. In Ireland, there must be 200 boxing clubs, and I'd say if there's 7 or 8 MMA clubs, I don't know, I'd be surprised. You know, it's just a much lower level sport. And here we had the superstar coming over, and I know he was fighting in a different discipline, but God almighty, if you were to ask me, if Floyd at 28 took on Conor at 40 in the cage, he'd whip his ass. And I do believe that if the roles were reversed, Floyd would have a very good chance of whipping a 40-year-old Conor. And Floyd Mayweather was 20 pounds lighter in that ring, right? And,
yeah,
you know, and you know, I only found this out since, was that Floyd's uncle wasn't training for this camp. Joe Gallagher was training him for this camp, because he just put the earmuffs up. He walked around for 6 rounds, didn't throw a fucking punch, and then the next thing, he just knocked him out, came on strong. You know, Scott Quigg would be proud. You know, people are giving Conor some respect. I think, like, you know, he is going from a different discipline, and, you know, he did quite well considering, I think, his athletic capabilities. But, you know, this vaunted power that Paul thought was giving him a 15% chance of a knockout, where is that power gone? Where is that power? And he's a dominant guy.
In there, wasn't he?
What?
Floyd was the puncher in there.
Floyd was the puncher. And to be honest with you, lads, like, this was like, I think I did a tweet on it, this is like a shit version, a very low quality version of Floyd Mayweather versus Zab Judah, right? Floyd having to walk forward when a guy was a bit faster. This Floyd is shit. That Floyd, like, he will not fight again, not unless he is absolutely stony broke, because that Floyd looked took a hell of a lot of a slide. Like, I think any top 10 welterweight now knocks the hell out of Floyd. You know, someone like Bud Crawford would absolutely deal with Floyd. Floyd has slipped a lot. But his speed is gone.
I agree, Tom. He looked beatable, but I would say in his defense, he looked beatable because he fought a style that is not Floyd Mayweather whatsoever. I mean, if he was fighting a top 10 guy, he'd be fighting a style that he's fought throughout the majority of his career, surely.
Yeah, but he wouldn't be able to do that style now. You wouldn't be able to. You see, his reflexes have gone down considerably. There was times there, like when previously when he was doing that, if he was to do that walk forward, remember he did that style against Shane Mosley. You know, he did that style against Shane Mosley. He walked him down, and like he looked a vastly different fighter in that Shane Mosley fight when he did it. You know, I think this time, I'm not just saying like I think Floyd had way too much for Conor, but just looking at Floyd himself, he's 40, he's past it now. You know, and any of those, that puts what the Conor one into context. Conor is like in boxing would be a 154 pounder. You know, maybe that actually might be too small a weight, but you know, he's a 154 pounder. Can you imagine what Canelo would have done to him, or one of the Charlos, or Erickson Lublin, or fucking Liam Smith, or Liam Williams? They would just run through him for a shortcut.
Tom, I honestly think McGregor's defense is so bad that those kind of fighters would probably take him out inside a round.
Yeah, around maybe 3 rounds. You know, they would just absolutely blow him out. Can you imagine what Golovkin would do to him? Like, it's just not even like. So when people talk about like what a future for Mayweather or for McGregor in boxing, the only chance he has in boxing, like something like the Paulie Malignaggi fight, is a thing that I think he probably might do, because it's just a gimmick fight. McGregor in boxing is a gimmick fight. I think it just exposes the level of MMA as a worldwide sport. You know, it's like comparing soccer to Gaelic football. You know, like literally, it's like that. The levels are just way lower.
I agree. I don't think he'll fight in boxing again, because he's emerged from this fight with immense credit. Not to us, not to the hardcore fans, but to the casual public. He's emerged from the fight with credit, and he's been getting a lot of praise. Now, the payday he's going to get, the rumours are this did 6.5 million pay-per-view buys, which eclipses all previous records. So the money he's going to have earned from that fight, well into the 9 figures, he'll never earn again. The question is, if he fought Paulie Malignaggi and Paulie had 3 or 4 months to train for it, I honestly think Paulie Malignaggi would stop him. So I don't think
so.
He would risk it. I don't think he'd. He'll sail off now, surely.
But Paulie is shot, and Paulie is really a 140 fighter, and Floyd can hit harder than Paulie, and you know, and Paulie just got his arse handed to him by Eggington. You know, I would still pick Floyd to beat Eggington, for example. So I think Paulie's of a much lower level, you know, and I think maybe it might be a competitive fight, but you know, I think Paulie would probably win on points. But I just think that, you know, like Conor is he's like a character, you know, and you know, but I think that that is the type of boxing match where it's more about the fucking celebrity big brotherness of the fight, and it might do well on pay-per-view, and he might have a chance of winning, but you know, and it might be competitive. But like, can you imagine what Errol Spence would have done to him? Yeah, Errol Spence would have knocked him out in 2 rounds, and if he was giving away 7 or 20 pounds, he would just go through him. Kell Brook would leather him. You know, I think you have to go down to maybe the 50s ranks or the 100 ranks in the boxing. But to be honest with you, I think any decent Ted Cheeseman would beat the brakes off him.
I'd pick Luke Campbell to beat him. I'd pick Ahura Davis to beat him. You know, I think Josh Taylor would.
I don't know if Luke Campbell
would walk through him.
He might. I'll tell you who would definitely beat him and give away 30 to maybe 30 pounds would be Mikey Garcia. Would beat him and probably knock him out in 5 rounds and give 30 pounds. I must, because before I go, I'm not. I can talk for a few minutes, but before we go, I got to say that I listened to the podcast last week, and Jet was really on fire. He gave Paul such a hard time. It was extremely funny. Jet, I was laughing. You were talking to saying you're going to hang up, and man, you were on fire last week, Jet. They're giving it to fucking Paul.
You're a legend, mate. I had to shout you out, say happy Wednesday. I had to bring the Irish spirit.
I know, I heard at the end. And the Irish Takeover is still on, you see, boys. It's just a longer a longer. Do you know what pissed me off as well is that fight shouldn't have been stopped. That was worse than the Andre Ward fight. Seriously, the fix was in. He was standing. Yeah, he was standing. You know, he was just wearing out the older man. He was going to come on strong in the 11th round and stop him like AJ did, and they stopped it too early.
Sorry, I missed the sarcasm there for a second. I you were suggesting, yeah. Tom, do you think we'll? I mean, the commercial success of this fight is unprecedented. With that in mind, do you think we're going to be subjected to more boxing versus MMA matches? Bellew Bisping's been discussed. You know, there's been talk about Andre Berto moving to MMA. Do you think this is the start of a trend?
Well, I think if it does happen, like if the ones come over to boxing look, the UFC guys aren't going to be able to come over to boxing because the UFC won't allow it. They only allow it in exceptional terms. You know, it's like when the Cold War was on between like Showtime and HBO to make Tyson Lewis. They won't do cross promotional fights unless the money involved in that one thing can counter the interest in keeping them separate. So I think with UFC, there you had just a purely exceptional event where you have, you know, the biggest name in boxing, you know, Floyd, who's a pay-per-view megastar, and you also had the equivalent on the other side. Like when it comes down to Tony Bellew and, you know, Bisping, you know, who gives a shit? And, you know, maybe, you know, I just don't think that the UFC are going to allow all their fellas to go over to boxing to get beaten, because I think it damages their, you know, sport. You know, all these guys that thinking that, you know, they see him getting beaten up by a 40-year-old lighter guy, smaller guy, and getting his ass kicked. You know, it doesn't look too good. I know it's a different sport, but it still doesn't look good. So, you know, there's a lot of hype around that. If it does happen for a short while, it'll quickly run out of steam. You know, thing like that. McGregor could go back now to he could go back to MMA and he could get found out in that kind of Holly Holmes way. You know,
I think
I wouldn't be surprised.
I really think both men should retire. Conor McGregor, why does he want to go back to a sport where he's going to get 2 or 3% of the purse he's just got to be elbowed in the head and have his legacy ruined? You know, why do you do that? I think retirement is the sensible option for both guys, surely.
Well, Floyd, yeah, but with Conor McGregor, yeah, probably. But you know, he's a charismatic guy. These guys like the limelight, you know. You know, maybe he'll go into boxing and do a Malignaggi. Who knows how long his contract is with UFC? You know, that's another thing. You know, if his contract, you know, is up in a couple of years for UFC, maybe he'll do one more UFC fight and then go off on his own. You know, and then, you know, he'll be the money man, like on the UFC side. I don't really care about the money, to be honest with you. Like, Conor's a charismatic guy, but I just think I think he's a bit of a fucking asshole, to be honest with you. It's hard for me, like, to actually. That's the first time I've ever rooted for Floyd Mayweather in any fight I've ever seen. You know, and it's against an Irish guy. But here, betting wise, lads. Fucking amazing thing happened. I put a lot of money on Floyd or Paddy Power, and I don't know if you heard, they paid out about 3 or 4 days early. Did you hear that?
No, I missed that. What, they paid you out to? They
paid out on Mayweather early, so I took all the winnings and the whole lot and put it back on. I ended up getting 1.53 overall on Floyd to win.
Was that just a publicity stunt? Was it?
Yeah, I think they were afraid in Ireland of all the money going to McGregor, and in case a freak event happened, they wanted to kind of prevent people, you know, to put advertising out there to stop people fucking betting on McGregor and bringing the price in. And so they paid out on Floyd. And so basically I got all the money and the winnings and put it back on. So I ended up getting 2-9 and getting 1-4. So it ended up being 1.53, or it was like 19-36 I ended up getting. Imagine getting 19-36 Floyd Mayweather against a debutant. Fucking hell.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if the professionals were on Mayweather. I mean, you know, I know it's not the kind of world that I live in, but the people who put £1 million on a bet and that sort of thing, you wonder if they lulled in for a 2-9 Mayweather shot.
Yeah, the Vegas. Well, a Paddy Power wouldn't take them big bets, but I'm sure the Vegas bookies would take them. I'd say a lot of people I'd say moneyed people could have made a lot of money. I'd say, like, to me, that price, I was reading the Vegas bookies were saying that they would have priced that 100 to 1 or 50 to 1, somewhere like that. And it was priced at 4 to 1. So, and that's the bookies talking, but the amount of money that was coming in on McGregor, they had to offer it up the other side to Floyd to balance the books.
Yeah.
But
almost get double the price on Canelo as you could get on McGregor when he fought Floyd. Remarkable.
Yeah.
Tom, I know you're on a tight time scale, mate. Anything else you want to get off your chest before you depart?
I don't know. Where's Jay tonight as well?
Jay is travelling for work. He's hoping to join, but maybe more as a cameo.
Well, should we kick Paul off the podcast? This is what I want to know. I wanted Paul to be here tonight. I was thinking that we should have had like a vote both within us and then the chat, and we should make a decision on, or maybe a suspension. We could give him a suspension for maybe 25 show suspension, something like that. What do you reckon, Jet?
McGregor's biggest fanboy needs a timeout. Let's put it that way.
I'm telling you, that just shows you how much Paul hates fucking Floyd Mayweather. he literally took all the Dana White PR points and spouted them on this podcast. Oh my God. I couldn't believe it. I was hearing. Could be a high level troll.
I think Paul is actually, and I don't want to speak on his behalf. Obviously, when Paul arrives, we will give him the opportunity to have his full say. I think Paul will take the approach of McGregor did far better than expected. He won more rounds against Floyd than Canelo did. He won more rounds against Floyd than Pacquiao did. He overperformed massively. I'm totally vindicated. You guys were wrong to completely mug him off. I imagine that is the approach he will take. What
happened to his devastating power? What happened to that? Literally, you see his power in that fight. And as for a 154 guy against a small 147 guy, Floyd is not really a 147 fighter. He's really a 140 fighter.
Yeah.
He walks around at 150. He's in the ring at 150. He
weighed in 4.5 pounds below the limit.
Yeah, and I don't think he put weight on for that fight night weigh-in. So,
yeah,
you honestly, Kell Brook will be 10 pounds heavier than at 147 than Mayweather, probably. He'll be 160 on the fight night.
Oh, and the rest, mate, and the rest, yeah.
Yeah. So I think Paul is either losing the plot. He's a joined up member of the race wars, or he's super trolling us. I don't know what's going on.
I like the idea of Paul being a high level troll, and he knew all along that was just having a bit of bounce. But you never know. I
don't buy it.
Irish. Paul. Yeah. His next career move will be Conor McGregor's main PR man. Watch.
Oh my God!
He's gonna hype him up.
And Tanya, Conor McGregor's career is going to plummet soon afterwards. What do you reckon?
No comment.
Paul's not here. If you're listening to this, Paul, you deserve all the hassle, all the slagging you get for that one.
I know.
All you have to say about Paul is he's going to KO Floyd Mayweather.
I tell you, that Paul has never done it. That's the only crazy pick he's ever done. And in fact, usually his picks that are a little bit left field tend to be pretty on the money. But this one was just, this definitely goes down as the worst of all time.
It does. It is an all-time great bad pick. I vaguely remember sitting in front of a computer broadcasting to my 75 subscribers at the time, telling the world that Audley Harrison was going to spark out Deontay Wilder. So there's a few numbers in my back history for those who have the inclination to research it. So I won't be as harsh as you guys. Paul is boxing, but yeah, he's going to have to be a little bit thick-skinned on this one, I guess.
I think so. Right, lads, I'm going to have to do a runner.
Right.
I'll talk to you next week. And Jet, you're responsible now for slagging Paul to within an inch of his life. I want all the points that he brought up about it, and I want you all to dissect them one by one.
Well, that's if he continues not to duck and decides to show up.
Yeah, that's true. You know, people accuse Floyd of ducking, but we all know who the real ducker is here.
Yeah.
Signing out, lads. Signing out.
Take care, Irish. Good to chat.
All right. See you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Happy Wednesday, lads. Happy Wednesday. And the Irish takeover is still...
I'll say that for you at the end of the show. Don't worry, mate. Special mention.
Thanks, Jeff. The Irish takeover is still underway, but it's a more complex plan than was previously envisaged. Do you know, 4/5 of the panel here are basically Irish. Gossip is fully 100% Irish blood. Is that right?
Well, mate, as Morrissey once said, Irish blood, English heart. But yeah.
Oh, well, a traitor. He's an Irish traitor. Then there's me. Then there's Jay, who claims he's got a name like Lynch, he does claim Irish heritage, but we don't know how pure it is. So Jet, Paul claims it too. So Jet, you're going to have to do your family history, and then Irish takeover will be complete.
I'll ask my mom and see what I can.
Here's what you should do. You should ask your uncle Seamus. Is there any Irish blood in the clan?
Boys, I'm gonna dub one of my uncles Seamus and the other a random Irish name, and I'm gonna be part of Irish Takeover.
Good luck, lads. See you.
Take care, mate. Have a good one.
Cheers, Irish. Thanks for that. The inimitable Irish Tom, guys, making an extended cameo. Hope you enjoyed that. 126 of you watching. If you are one of them, please take the time to hit the thumbs up button and support this broadcast. Jet, let's go back to our discussion, mate. And I'm just going to pour myself a beer, actually. So if you wouldn't mind dragging out your response for a minute here, I will still be listening. I promise, just not on screen. But give us your take on these pay-per-view numbers. Rumored. Strong rumours of 6.5 million buys. Surely, I mean, you and I are not this similar age. Surely we will never see numbers like this again in our lifetime, Jet.
Yeah, I think, the numbers, they speak for themselves, to be honest. They far surpassed the Pacquiao numbers. They far surpass any of the, Anthony Joshua numbers that could, that he done against Klitschko. I think, even him versus Tyson Fury, if Fury was to ever return, that would never generate 6.5 mil. It might even be more. That's always an estimate. But there's no way, I can see in sort of my lifetime that, that's going to be beaten. It's a super fight. Obviously, it's one of the best in MMA in terms of his weight class. That's obviously up for debate, but some of his wins show that in MMA. Floyd Mayweather probably, he is. I think for maybe us two, we're similar age, as you said. He's probably the best fighter of this generation, of our generation at least. It's difficult to see that it be beaten. Floyd has, had a career long, pay-per-view elite. He's done everything in the sport, and it's difficult to see it being beaten. Really good numbers. They both get paid, so best of luck to them. Mayweather obviously has Mayweather Promotions and other various businesses outside the ring, so he has stuff going for him. Conor McGregor, very touching story, actually. Obviously he dropped out and pursued MMA full time, got signed by the UFC, and he's gone from strength to strength. So, yeah, I'm glad he's actually got paid, regardless of thing. He's a very entertaining character, and it's actually good that there was actually no bad blood between the two and extended sort of beef to hype a potential rematch or anything like that. He accepted his dues. He accepted Floyd was the better man, and yeah, as I said beforehand, he has options in the UFC and maybe a few in boxing as well.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. And you never know what to believe, but some of the stuff I've seen online suggests that 6.5 million is purely from the US buys. Now, Eddie Hearn was on IFL TV suggesting that he felt that UK buys this fight would break the UK record, which was obviously historically held by Hatton Mayweather and then subsequently beaten by Anthony Joshua Klitschko. So if that were to be the case, that the 6.5 million was just US buys, and you were to throw in somewhere between 1 million and 1.5 million UK buys, you're looking at this fight coming close to doing, $1 billion, which is pretty staggering. But presumably that will be the peak earning for both guys, and I guess to an extent, good luck to them. Jet, I'm thinking we should now move to the undercard.
Yeah.
Or have you got anything more to say on Floyd Conor before we move it on?
No, I think we've exhausted as much as possible on that the super fight. So the undercard is probably the next logical step.
Fantastic. So Cleverly versus Badou Jack. I guess we can come to Cleverly in a minute or two. I'm obviously a bit biased, as you guys know, but putting Cleverly to one side, I've got to say Badou Jack is, for me, becoming... and I expected him to beat Cleverly. I picked against Cleverly last week, despite the fact I'm a super fan of his. But Badou Jack is a real underrated fighter. For me, he's actually towards the top of the sport now. He has a huge amount in his arsenal, and I appreciate that Cleverly, held a regular title, and that's extremely unpopular amongst the boxing hardcore. When Jack initially started showing such levels of improvement after his knockout loss to Derek Edwards, I was suspicious. I was suspicious as to where the improvement was coming from. But right now, I genuinely think he represents the elite of the sport. And if he does fight Adonis Stevenson, like is being implied, I'd probably pick him to beat Adonis Stevenson. I think he is really, really, really very, very good, Jet. What's your take?
Yeah, I said this in my sort of video that I just put up in the last sort of hour. I said, Badou Jack has thrown out the demons since the Derek Edwards loss. He's progressed massively since that fight. He's beaten a really, really good, strong sort of line of opponents. If you look at the opponents he's faced, Anthony Durrell, he was expected to lose that fight. He beat him. George Groves, some people expected George Groves to get the decision out there. A very close fight, but Jack won that. James DeGale, some people thought Badou Jack won that. Lucien Boutte, I thought he got robbed in that fight. He got a draw in that fight. He's done phenomenally. He's done fantastically, honestly. He's really, really grown. I think he's become a better fighter. He's become more fundamentally sound. He's a decent puncher. He's not concussive or anything, but he's strong puncher, I think, especially now since he's moved up in weight. I think probably doing better. He was obviously he was still performing at a high level at 168 with James DeGale, who's probably the number one at the moment since Jack's moved up. But he's very, very underrated. I think people just look over him, especially the Edwards defeat does really have a blemish on his record, but I think people are looking down on him because of that. And I think he's really improved, and he's definitely at the top of the sport. I'd pick him to beat Stevenson. I think he'd have a fairly decent chance of beating Andre Ward. There's other opponents, contenders, solid contenders there. I think he'd, have a good chance against Bertabaev. I think he'd beat Sullivan Barrera. I think he'd beat Joe Smith Jr., Andrew Fafara. I think, he's probably towards the bottom end of the top 10, only due to moving up in weight recently and beating Cleverly. But, he can be a real force at 175. He's actually talked of moving to cruiserweight because obviously he looked like a bigger man in terms of just stature. I think weight wise he probably cuts down from cruiserweight to get down to 175 and 168 beforehand, and he looked physically more imposing than Nathan Cleverly. And I think if he does move up to cruiserweight and he fights the right opponent, I think he could win another belt. He looks really, really good. But obviously, it's early days. He's just moved up to 175, two-weight world champion. I know it's the regular belt, as you said, but you know he's really pushed on in his career. He obviously is coming towards the tail end of his career. He's 33, but you know, hopefully he can get some big fights. He made some good money. I think he made what 750K for this fight, which is pretty decent. Probably one of his highest paydays. Actually, the De Gale fight was quite more, but you know, one of his higher paydays. Let's put it that way. He's done well for himself. Let's put it that way. And you know, obviously, again, he's come from being a nobody, and we all know the story. Shannon Briggs brought him over from Sweden, and you know whatnot. So it's a good story, and yeah, I'm glad he's actually doing well. He seems like a very, very likable sort of person in his interviews. He's very well spoken, and he seems like he has a lot of respect for all his fighters. It was good to see him and Nathan Cleverly share a picture in the dressing room after Cleverly announced his retirement. So yeah, I think he's a real force at 175.
Yeah, I didn't actually realise he's 33. I mean, I guess that tempers enthusiasm somewhat, but the guy's improved so much. I mean, he's a far better 33-year-old than he was as a 28-year-old, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I'd agree. As I said, he's grown so much. I mean, in such a short space of time, he's probably changed things up in his camp. Not trainers wise, but he's probably changed things up. He's learned a lot being around Floyd Mayweather, and sort of his prospects. We saw two prospects on the undercard, Andrew Tabiti and Gervonta Davis. So he's in the gym with them and he's learning, and he's learning from veterans as well. Obviously, Shannon Briggs pops into his gym and that sort of stuff. So it's good. It is good for the sport. It actually sets down a marker and a bit of not a precedent, but it sets down some motivation for fighters in and around that stage in their career, that they can improve and they can push forward and they can grow from a defeat. A defeat is not everything, I think people nowadays in boxing, they put too much emphasis on the O. They should just get into the bigger fights, the biggest fights possible for them, and give it a right go, and learn from a defeat and improve from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to say it. I am still surprised at the improvement Badou Jack has made. Knockout loss.
Maybe on the juice. He may be on the juice, as in.
Yeah.
We don't know that, but there hasn't been any evidence to suggest that. He's obviously been the one thing I will say is he was obviously he was WBC champion at 168, wasn't he? So he was enrolled in the VADA sort of program, the clean boxing program. So
good.
Yeah, so
good. That's a very good point. And we've got to operate innocent until proven guilty. You don't typically see the levels of improvement that Badou Jack has shown for a guy in his late 20s going into his early 30s. Having said that, he's in the Mayweather camp. He's probably in the best place to eke out that improvement, I guess. You're more likely to see that improvement from someone in Badou Jack's circumstances than you would be if they were working with Joe Gallagher, I guess. So, so there you go. Jet, Cleverly. For me, the retirement was a very, very, very good decision. Cleverly is a fighter who either doesn't want it enough or is completely past it. I'm not 100% sure which one it is. He didn't push himself with his trainer. He stayed close to home. He's not taken on a boxing trainer. He's completely from the caliber and class he showed early on in his career. He's unfortunately become something of a punching bag. And it pains me to say it. He's a guy who I detect is not in love with the sport. He's a guy who hasn't stayed active. He's looked to plot big fights and to get good paydays. I don't think Cleverly's got the desire to come back and rebuild over 8-rounders and fight British and European titles. I don't see him as that kind of guy. I don't see him as the kind of guy who's going to go over to the States, move away from home and take a new trainer and try and come back. He's a young man, but he's got a lot of miles on the clock. It's been well publicized that he's an intelligent man with a university degree in mathematics. And my understanding is he's been very, very sensible with his money and has invested it very wisely. So bearing in mind all of those factors, Jet, I was very sad to see what I saw in the 5th round. Nathan cleverly bobbing and weaving up against the ropes, not throwing much back, just moving left, moving right. Reminiscent of the 12th round of the Tony Bellew fight. Enough is enough is enough. I think the retirement is a good move, Jet.
Yeah, I have to, agree. You're spot on, mate. It's sad to see Nathan Cleverly go out that way. I'm not saying he had the most stellar career, because I don't think he did, but he won a version of the world title. That maybe the way he won the WBO title, Bramer didn't really want to fight him, so he kind of had to. They forced him to vacate, and then he got upgraded from interim champion to full champion. Fought a series of semi-credible contenders, Tommy Karpensi, Mohammadi, those sort of opponents where Cleverly was expected to beat them, but he did so in fairly decent fashion. He was a boxer. He obviously used to train with Enzo Calzaghe. I think he was at his gym and that sort of stuff. He left him, and now he's gone to I can't remember his trainer's name, but he's basically a fitness coach, and he's like a workhorse. And Cleverly really negated his his skill. I'm not saying he was the most skilled boxer, don't get me wrong. He's not a George Groves or a James DeGale or someone like that around his weight class or something. But he was fairly, he's fairly decent. I think the Kovalev defeat took a lot out of him. I think once you talk about retirement, once you're mentally, you're not in the right frame of mind to, have another fight or continue on at the highest level. And I think especially the Jürgen Bremer win. I we all have a bit of a banter, and I know you're a big fan, but he was losing spots in that fight against Jürgen Bremer, and Bremer's a 37, 38-year-old man. And he obviously got lucky, and Bremer didn't really want it. Got the elbow injury. That really flattered to deceive, Nathan. I think obviously he wanted this fight, tried to move on, maybe have a Ward fight or something. I know there's not much money in a Ward fight, but he obviously won the biggest fights possible. And it is a bit of a shame that he's gone out like that, and he only got 100K for this fight, which is a bit of a shame. You would expect. I know he's holding a regular belt, but he's a champion going to another fighter's backyard on a big bill. You would expect a bit more. Gervonta Davis got paid a lot compared to Nathan Cleverly, and it happens. What there's nothing really you can say or do. It's happened now. He's had a good career, as I said, not a stellar career, but he's had a really good career. Like in terms of what he wanted to do, he's on paper he's a two-time world champion. He fought the best. He didn't duck anyone. He tried to fight the best available opponents at any given time. He's obviously I think even if he was going to come back, he's stuck in between weights. I think he's too small for cruiserweight, but I think at light heavy, I think he probably does drain himself a little bit. He said he made the weight well, but I don't believe that. He didn't look great on the scales for me, and he's a bit too big for 168 as well. So it's a bit touch and go with Cleverly. A bit saddening, but the right career move. And as you said, he's got a 2-2 in mathematics. Very good. And if he wants a job, like a normal job, he can get it. If not, he can become an analyst or a sort of pundit, part of the punditry team at Sky or something like that. It will. He seems like he knows a fair bit about boxing. It's just a shame that he wasn't able to transcend it in the ring, especially with his sort of coaching setup as well.
Totally agree. For me, two pivotal moments of the career. One was the Kovalev loss. I really think that took the wind out of his sails. Prior to that loss, and people laugh about this now. Prior to that loss, he was one of the top names in British boxing. There were people saying that he would beat Carl Frotz if they fought. There were people saying that he would unify the light heavyweight title and beat the likes of Bernard Hopkins and Chad Dawson. And, that really took the wind out of his sails. He went from an undefeated fighter who was going places and who was linked to the top names to being battered and beaten inside a couple of rounds. The second pivotal moment was the loss to Tony Bellew in the rematch. Possibly a mistake to move up to cruiserweight for the fight. I still believe, and I know I've got a bit of a blind spot when it comes to Tony Bellew. I still believe Cleverly should have won that fight. And don't get me wrong, I agree Bellew did win the fight. But even if you look back on that fight, if you look at Cleverly's skill set and the success that Cleverly was having at times in the fight, specifically early on, he really, really, really should have won that fight. That was a fight that was there for the taking for Nathan Cleverly. But he didn't take it. He didn't find a way to win. And I think those two moments took all the momentum out of him and kind of put him in a position where he was looking for retirement fights and final paydays at the age of 27, 28, which is never a good position to be in. The Fonfara fight, a fantastic, fantastic fight. But I've got to say, that's the kind of fight that halves careers, and that's why Cleverly is an old man at the age of 30. But there we go. Wish him all the best in retirement. I, for one, hope we don't see him again in a boxing ring. I didn't actually watch the Tabiti fight, and I didn't actually watch the Gervonta Davis fights. Give us your take on those two, mate.
Yeah, Tabiti looked pretty decent. He looked dominant. He was dominant, but we can't really, it's difficult to say. Cunningham is way past it for me. He's approaching 40, and yeah, I wouldn't take too much from that. But he looks a real good prospect. They really, really rate him. I think in the Mayweather gym, Floyd Senior actually says he's the best prospect after. Once Floyd's gone, he's basically the best in the gym. So, yeah, let's see how he progresses. It wasn't the most entertaining fight. He kind of dominated, but you can take from that what you will if you do want to watch it. But it wasn't the most exciting fight. Same with Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis kind of dominated against Fonseca. This finish was a bit controversial. And I'd say Davis didn't look great. He came in at 132, so he came in 2 pounds heavier, which is very, very unprofessional. He lost his belt on the scale. Fonseca could win it, obviously, if he could cause the upset. But it was just Davis is difficult because I've always been on the side that Davis is very small for 130. I don't think he's a big. I don't think he's a big super featherweight. He's about 5'5" or something like that. And obviously he's missed weight. He failed to weigh in 3 times against Liam Walsh, was it? And going up to 135. I know he's obviously not going to fight the top guys straight away, but those guys are tall guys. You look at all the champions. I think there's 2 beatable champions there. I think Robert Easter's there for the taking for him. And I think he could beat Terry Flanagan as well. But they're both very tall. They're not small lightweights. Jorge Linares obviously is fighting Luke Campbell next in a few weeks. And Mikey Garcia, I think those 2 would give him a real handful. I'm not saying Davis beats them or he beats them or loses to them. But those are very, very, very tough fights. So,
do we have to accept that he's not gonna stay at 130 now, Jet? I know he's only a youngster, but this is the second time on the bounce. I mean, is his career over at 130 before it's begun?
Yeah, I think he said that on the Thursday actually before the weigh-in. He said he's thinking about moving up to lightweight. So yeah, you take from that what you will, I guess. If he's weighing in at 132, then you can he's not a small guy. In terms of he's very, very stocky. He's a small but very, very stocky figure. And I don't think he probably cuts a lot of weight to make 130. He's probably close to maybe 145, 146 or something like that. If you normal walking, and cutting 15 pounds is a lot of weight to cut. Even at 135, there's hello, what? Sorry, give me a sec. 1 second.
No worries, Jet. Yeah, no worries. I worry with Gervonta Davis that there is a risk of him being in a not dissimilar position to Adrian Broner in a few years. I know they're different fighters. I know people will say Gervonta Davis is a far superior talent to Adrian Broner. There's some similarities there. There's the Floyd Mayweather drink. There's the party lifestyle outside of the ring. There's the fact that young age weight classes are, seemingly going through, weights are being missed. And a guy like Gervonta Davis is not going to have the same success at 135 and 140, let me tell you. Are you back with us, Jet?
Yeah, sorry about that. Just father wanted to find some the house keys or something. Yeah, mate, I'd agree with that. The thing is, I think he's a better fighter than someone like an Adrian Broner, but yeah, he's very small. He's very. I just think the height. They are weight classes for a reason, and obviously weight doesn't really take into consideration height. But I think when you're going up against a guy who's maybe he's 5'5", let's say, maybe even Luke Campbell. Luke Campbell's very tall for the weight. I think he's 5'10" or something like that. He's a good 5 inches taller. There's got to be some, the discrepancy has to come into effect at one point or another. And the missing weight is very unprofessional. I have to agree. Not saying he's not an exciting fighter or anything, but you got to have a certain level of professionalism when fighting. So it is disappointing, but I didn't think he looked good in spots in this fight. I don't know if you want to go back and watch it, but he didn't look as good as he did against Pedraza or Liam Walsh. Let's put it that way. He did not look as good.
Yeah, it's probably coming as a result of him draining himself down, I guess. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out, and hopefully Floyd can guide him and make sure we don't have another Broner on our hands. That would be a disappointment, given the talent that he's shown in his career to date, I guess. Okay. I'm just referring to the agenda that
Miguel Cotto, was it? Was that?
Oh yeah, that was it. I knew there was something else. Yeah. I didn't watch the Cotto Kamagai fight either, mate. Are you up to date there?
Yeah, I watched the highlights. I didn't watch the whole fight. I didn't really want to sit through that. But it wasn't the worst fight. But Cotto did what he needed to do. He looked okay, I guess. Kamagai's there to be beat. He's not a top-rated contender at 154. He's had a few wars against Soto Carras, I think it was, and a few others. So it was the guy he was supposed to beat. He obviously picks up a version of a world title at 154, the WBO, and there's actually a rematch. Was it Smith Williams? I think that'll probably be for the interim belt or something like that.
Yeah.
Or final eliminator. So they'll probably be the mandatory. But I assume Cotto is not going to be looking for that. He's obviously said, I'm leaving it down to Freddie Roach, and Freddie's obviously said they're looking for the Canelo GGG winner. So I mean he said that'll be his last fight in December. He's had a Hall of Fame career. He's really had a good career. Enjoyed watching his fights. I think it's time for him to call it a day after his last fight. For me, I don't know, slightly off track, but there's only the two of us. Kell Brook, if he was to move to 154 and come back, I think obviously if he wants to fight at 154, I think that's a good option. The belt may be vacant. If not, if they can make the Cotto fight, that would be a good fight. Obviously, it's not a money fight for Cotto, but for Brook, that's probably a good fight if he can if he can get that fight. I doubt he will because he's not in the rankings. But yeah, Cotto's well past it now. But obviously, one more fight and call it quits.
Yeah, I'll tell you who I saw calling out Cotto today. Unbelievably, Mikey Garcia said that he'd go to 154. Surely,
Christ,
you know, I mean, Mikey Garcia maybe would beat Cotto. I don't know, but
the thing is, Cotto is, you know, I don't even see Cotto as a 147 fighter. To be honest, he's not a big he's not a big 154 guy. He's not a big 160 guy. 147 maybe he's probably a 140 or 147 fighter. Even at this stage in his career, I don't think he's a massive sort of you know, he's just in terms of weight, he's not huge. Obviously, he doesn't rehydrate heavily at 154 or 160 or in between weights if he's doing a catch weight fight. And on top of that, he's not a tall fighter either. And yeah, I think Mikey Garcia would be somewhat of a test for Cotto even at this stage in his career. You know, Cotto is well past it, so Mikey Garcia is obviously probably in the prime of his career, and he'd give him a real handful. Not saying, you know, Garcia would win, but he'd give him a real handful. It'd be an interesting fight to see. Let's put it that way.
yeah, Mikey Garcia just seems to be calling out all the names. Like he doesn't seem to be a guy who's interested in crafting a route to a world title, defending it, unifying it. He just seems to want the big names right now, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so because he's a three-weight world champion. So I don't really think I think in his mind and his team's mind, I don't think they're worried about belts anymore. If he wins one at 140, which may happen because Crawford's expected to move up. Obviously, he's vacated one of the belts today, the IBF. You know, he probably expected to vacate the other amount of his belts, which he holds three. He could even just move up and fight for a vacant belt and defend it against, you know, a Julius Indongo or someone like that. Not saying Indongo is a big name, but in the division, I guess he is, or an Adrian. He's beating Adrian Broner. So, yeah, I mean, there is a bit of the fight I'd really like to see Garcia in is the Jorge Linares fight. I think that's a real real exciting fight, excellent fight. Both, one is very technically adept. The other one is slightly more dynamic, very fast. They both, Garcia's probably got the edge in punching power and that sort of stuff. But yeah, that'd be an exciting fight. Obviously, that's if Linares comes through his defense against Luke Campbell. But yeah, that's probably the fight I'd like to see. Whether or not it generates a lot of money, that's kind of another story. I guess we'll wait and see how Linares Campbell does. I think it's in Vegas, so I guess we'll see the numbers, and if it's viable, then that'd be a good fight.
Totally agree, mate. Totally agree. Okay. Yeah, I was now going to move on to look at the York Hall card on Friday. Is there anything else you wanted to throw into the mix regarding action from last week or news stories in the world of boxing before we do that?
Not too much. Obviously, we just mentioned Crawford vacated his belt. Josh Warrington. I don't know if we spoke about it off air, but I didn't really want to speak about that briefly.
Yeah. Let's do it, mate. Dennis Kalin, we were talking about, right?
Yeah. So obviously he's been mandated to fight Dennis Kalin in an IBF final eliminator. Obviously, the IBF belt holder in that weight class is Lee Selby, and he's been, wanting that Selby fight for a long time. You know what? I'll be honest. I think Dennis Kalin beats him. I don't rate Warrington. He has improved over recent years, but fundamentally, Ryan Walsh. He beat Ryan Walsh. Is it in Denmark or something like that? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying Ryan Walsh is any better or worse than Josh Warrington, but yeah, I just think he's not fundamentally better than Dennis Kalin, and I think he should use his long jab and win a points decision. I'd say, but I think they both lose to Selby.
Oh yeah. I mean, the more I look at it, Jet, I mean, I don't know the lower weight classes like you do, but the more I look at it, I think I think Lee Selby is one of the best fighters in the world right now. And I think a guy like Josh Warrington is just a million miles off, mate. I think it would look like Floyd v. Conor again.
Selby would probably just pick him off at will, you know. I don't think Salen is a decent fighter. Don't get me wrong; he's not like a top sort of 15 or 20. I don't think he's probably more of a top 30, top 40 type operator at feather. But you know, I think he just has too much tools for Josh Warrington. I don't see what Warrington. He might bring a higher punch output, but that's about it. I mean, we've seen what, you know. Look at the fight of the weekend. If you look at that, you know, high punch output doesn't mean you're going to win the fight. You know what I mean? You've got to do a bit more, and you've got to have a bit more in your arsenal. So yeah, I'd go with Dennis Salen in that fight. I think they both lose to Selby. Maybe it's a good thing that he's actually fighting in an IBF final eliminator, because he was actually supposed to face Joseph Diaz, and Diaz is actually on the undercard facing Lara, another undefeated fighter, on the Canelo GGG undercard. So it's maybe a good in a WBC final eliminator. So maybe it's a good thing that Warrington avoided that, because if he did win and he faced Gary Russell, I think Russell would probably decapitate the kid, like the poor kid. So maybe he's dodged a bullet there, because Selby isn't the biggest puncher.
Yeah. It won't look like good matchmaking from Frank Warren. You know, if Warrington loses against a guy like Salen, who's a respected name amongst the boxing hardcore, but won't create a huge interest amongst the wider population, you know. And Frank took two fighters from Matchroom, Tyrone Nurse and Josh Warrington, and if they both suffer losses, you know, relatively early in their deals with Frank, you know, that may potentially affect other fighters who are considering making that transition as BT Sports continues its progress into the boxing world, I guess. But there you go.
One more as well. Santa Cruz versus Avalos has been made. Pretty poor fight.
Oh yeah.
I see the disdain. I see the disdain on your face. Yeah, I just read it on Boxing Scene. So yeah, not the most stellar fights, but it says he's looking to make a fight with Mares, who's obviously the regular champion, and a potential third fight with Carl Frampton.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting stuff. There's a lot going on in those divisions at the minute, anyway. But okay. Cool. To everyone watching, just to highlight the fact that there is boxing on Sky this Friday. It's part of the Matchroom Next Gen series. It's at Your Call, Bethnal Green. Understand the show is sold out, so tickets are no longer available, but it will be broadcast on Friday night. And I'll read out the bill. William Webber making his debut against a journeyman. Danny Dignam, I've seen this guy box, 3-0 prospect. I'd recommend looking out for him, fighting a journeyman. Lawrence Sicoli, 4-0, fighting Blaise Menduo, who you guys may remember got starts by Daniel Dubois. Joshua Buatsi, 1-0, fighting a guy with a losing record. Jake Ball, 9-1, versus Joe Sheriff, 11-0. Felix Cash, 5-0, versus Fernando Heredia, 3-1. Conor Benn takes on undefeated Kane Baker, who's 4-0. Joe Cordina, 3-0, fights Jamie Spate, who's a bit of a name on the domestic scene, I guess you could say, winning record. And Ted Cheeseman, 9-0, takes on Francesco Lezzi, who's 9-8-1. Jet, out of those names, out of those prospects, who he is sort of most looking forward to seeing? Look, he's clearly not one of the strongest cards you're likely to see, but potentially some names that you'd be interested in seeing their progression.
Yeah, Joshua Buatsi, probably the first guy springs to mind. Very exciting fighter. Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing him. Joe Cordina, I know people don't really, they have mixed opinions about Joe Cordina. I think he's decent. I don't think he'll be like a world champion or anything like that. But I do think he's got very good skill. Probably get to a European fringe world level or something like that. Decent fighter. Lawrence Okoli, just to see how he gets on. He's vulnerable. He has that vulnerability towards him because of the defense and that sort of stuff. He's very wild as well. Ted Cheeseman, I think, is very underrated. I actually think he's a very, very good fighter.
Yeah.
I'd like to see him, see how he progresses. He's in a bit of a stat division in terms of the world level guys, but the domestic and European scene is a bit, dry. So his right is maybe a bit quicker than expected, I guess, from Matchroom's perspective. Who was the other guy on Danny Dignam or something? He's a
Yeah,
super middleweight prospect, is he? Am I right?
Let me have
I,
a
I
look.
think he's a super
Yeah,
middleweight
he is.
prospect.
He is. I saw him on debut at Wembley Arena. I thought he looked really tasty.
Yeah, I've seen a few highlights of him, and I think he's pretty decent. I think he looks good. Felix Cash, I'm not really keen on. Don't think he's
No,
great.
I think he looks all right, actually.
Cash,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I'm not really keen on him, but I guess we'll wait and see. He's still got plenty of time because he fights at middleweight, so yeah, he's got plenty of time. Obviously, the middleweight domestic scene is, it's kind of died out since Eubank and Billy Joe have moved on to pastures new, and the rest of the scene has been a bit, as I said, it's been a bit bare bones. But yeah, he probably has. He probably gets a British level, something like that. He seems okay, not the best out of the lot, but yeah, there's some good. I would have liked to see Josh Kelly on the card, but yeah, obviously that's not going to happen. It's there's some good fighters on there. There's some decent fighters on there.
I was ringside when Jake Ball got horrifically knocked out.
JJ McDonough, was it? JJ
That's the
McDonough?
one, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let me tell you, that fight, that was JJ McDonough. I think he turned up very late notice, very overweight,
Yeah. Yeah.
not in his natural weight class. So I saw him afterwards. He was,
He fights at super middle, I think.
yeah,
Sorry.
he,
Yeah.
he was visibly heavy afterwards, and he was having a few lagers off after the but Jake Ball got absolutely flattened in that fight, and it was more just how he really didn't when he was put in that position, and he really, I'm told he was flattened in the amateurs once or twice as well. So I'll be honest and say I have some concerns about him in the sport of boxing. So he's another one I'll keep an eye open for. Conor Benn,
Yeah.
number one.
I think you've noticed that I haven't even brought his name up. I have no interest in the kid. No, like not like a personal thing or whatever. He's fighting in the wrong weight class. He's fighting like probably two weight classes above his what he should be. He's got no power. He's very inconsistent in terms of his fighting. He fights. He'll have a fight. He'll take a long extended break, and he'll have another fight like towards the end of the year. It's very questionable matchmaking and sort of teamwork. Matchroom, and obviously I think he trains with Tony Sims. Very, very questionable what they're doing with Conor Benn. I'm not exactly sure, but he looks like he's a KO waiting to happen. To be honest, just not even defensively. Just the bigger guys. They're much, much, much bigger than him. They're just fundamentally better than him. And yeah, I just think it's KO waiting to happen. It's not a personal thing, but yeah.
Yeah. I've met Conor Benn, and he really is a very small guy. I mean, if he wants to fight a welterweight, if you stood him next to like a Sam Eggington or a Bradley Skeet or a Kell Brook, you would assume there were 3 or 4 weight classes between them. And I don't believe that's an exaggeration on my behalf. He's fighting a 4-0 welterweight, Kane Baker. Obviously, I've never seen him fight. The guy's 4 wins have all come against opponents with losing records, and he's yet to score a stoppage. So, Kane Baker's obviously very, very untested at any sort of level. His record would indicate he may not be the biggest puncher in the world. It's probably a fight that, on the balance of probability, Conor Benn will get through, but it's only a matter of time, Jet, surely.
Yeah, as I said before, I think you agree with me on this. He's just a KO waiting to happen. It's not, it's nothing personal. It's just he, you have weight classes for a reason. let's put it that way. You have weight class for a reason. You know, you can't be going against a guy who's, you know, maybe double the height, not double, but you know, he's a good 6-7 inches taller than you, and they're fully fledged welterweight or maybe even a light middleweight cutting down, even a middleweight cutting down. You know, these guys. Errol Spence is he weighs in probably the 160s and he cuts down to 147. You know, you can't. I'm not saying obviously he's going to fight Errol Spence anytime soon, but because of the name value he brings, there's a possibility that he'll be fast tracked and he'll get towards a certain level and he'll be found out. And as I said, he's just not in the weight class. It's different if he's at maybe 130 or 135, but he's, you know, two weight classes at the minimum above what he should be fighting at, and you know, it just doesn't look good going later down the line for Conor Benn. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and what's odd is how obvious this is. I mean, it's not a marginal thing here. It doesn't look like it's a borderline call or a grey area. It looks like Conor Benn is obviously a featherweight or a super featherweight, and he's fighting at welterweight. You know, if you and I are seeing it that clearly, surely the team around him are seeing it. I mean, you know, the likes of Ahara Davis and Ricky Burns, and those guys are guys from lighter weight classes. They must be a lot bigger than him. They must hit a lot harder than him. You know, this can't be something that's gone unnoticed. So it's very, very, very bizarre. My only thoughts are that Eddie Hearn and the team know that Conor Benn is a million miles away off a world title, and maybe rather than rushing him at all, you know, he's had 7 fights now. Maybe they want to get him to 30-0. Maybe they want to kind of do a Deontay Wilder route with him. Fight him for 3 or 4 years in 6-rounders, in 8-rounders on next gen cards, and yeah, maybe they want to give him that experience, and maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, looking at slowly reducing him through the weight classes and building him up in levels. I don't know if that's the route they want to go down, and you know, if so, maybe there's sense in not having him cut too much weight because he's not fighting the level of opposition to make championship level fights. I don't know, but it seems very, very strange to me. You know.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Yeah.
Okay. That's the main boxing on this weekend. Obviously, it's started a new season, but it's relatively quiet. Obviously, the Super 8 tournament is starting in the near future. So when that comes on, there's going to be a hell of a lot more activity. There's obviously a lot of big fights coming up. Golovkin, Canelo, Hughie Fury versus Joseph Parker. So a bit more action to savour. But hopefully we're coming to the close of what has been a slightly quieter period in British boxing. Obviously, Floyd and Conor making huge waves globally. Jet, anything you want to add before we call it a day and wrap it up a little bit early tonight?
Just wanted to say shout out to my main man Paul, who picked McGregor, and he's going to become the main hype man for Mr. Notorious, and walk him out to the ring in his next fight, wherever that may be.
Paul, if you're watching, mate, I love you. I've got your back. You'll always be welcome. You've got some explaining to do, mate, but we've all been there. We've all been there. Great. Thanks to everyone for watching. Thanks to everyone for joining in. Everyone in the chat, thank you very much. Jet, you've done a lot of talking tonight, mate. Appreciate you leading the charge and giving up your Wednesday evening. Thank you for pretty much holding the fort throughout the course of this show, mate. Let's give your channel a little plug, because you mentioned you just uploaded on it, Jet.
Yeah, I did. I think it was just basically about an hour and a half ago now. So just discussing the Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, the Gervonta Davis and the Badou Jack sort of fights, and how they break down, how how the guys, where they will go, what the next career moves are, and that sort of stuff. So if anyone wants to check it out, please do. Do all that good stuff, and yeah, support if you so wish to.
Absolutely. Channel name is Boxing Discussions, so check that out. I haven't watched it yet, Jet, but I will do. And yeah, hit a subscription to Jet so you can check out his future stuff. Hit a subscription to me if you haven't done so already. Yeah, if you've enjoyed this, if you're watching live or if you're watching after it's gone up on the channel, please hit the thumbs up button, which will mean this gets out to a wider audience, and hopefully we get new viewers joining the channel. And apart from that, we'll be back next Wednesday at 8:30, guys. Look forward to it massively, and I'll speak to you all then.
Happy Wednesday for Irish Tom. Au revoir for myself.
Cheers, mate.